Today I'm sitting down with Biz Stone, who is the co-founder of Twitter, creator of Jelly, and he also has a new book out. Let's chat with him.
Did you ever study computer science, or were you always on the more creative side?
No, I never studied computer science. I accidentally got into technology stuff because, well, I'll tell you a funny story. And this is by way of getting to the technology stuff. I went to college after high school, and I got this really great scholarship. It was called the Chancellor Scholarship for Excellence in the Arts. And they give out one student per year, and I got it. And it was a free ride at UMass. And on the side, I got a job moving these heavy boxes at a book publishing company called Little Brown and Company, which was in Boston, on Beacon Hill in Boston, in one of those old cool mansions. And so I was just schlepping boxes up and down for like $10 an hour. And this was 1994-ish. And it was a time when the art department, the department that designs book jackets for the publishing company, they were just switching over from spray glue and stat machines and X-Acto knives and like just old school stuff, INT transfer, to they just got a bunch of Mac workstations, and they were told like, this is how we're going to do it now. Mm-hmm. And I was good at that stuff. So when the whole art department went to lunch one day, I snuck onto the art director's workstation, and I found one of the covers that hadn't been designed yet, needed designing. And what they have is they have like I think they called it a transmittal. It was one piece of paper with, here's how we want the book cover to look and feel and yada, yada, yada. So I designed the book jacket, I printed it out, I matted it up, and I slipped it in with the other book jackets to go off for approval, editorial and sales approval in New York City.
So you didn't even work there?
I didn't. Yeah, it's like that episode of Seinfeld. I don't even really work here. But and then I went back to moving the boxes, and and when the art director came back a couple of days later, he was like, "Who designed this jacket?" He was sort of asking there was like 6 people in the department, and I said, "Oh, that was me," and he was like, "The box kid," and. And I said, yeah. And so what happened was he offered me a job to work directly with him as a designer of book jackets. And what
does a book jacket look like? I'm just curious.
Oh, it wasn't that good. It was called Midnight Riders, the story of the Allman Brothers Band. And the big fancy thing I did was I did a clipping path around the band. It took them out of their surroundings and put like a gradient behind them or something. It wasn't a good book. It was one of my worst covers, but the editorial and salespeople liked it. So he offered me a job, and then that's when I made one of my first like major decisions. I had to say, well, I got this great free ride at university, but don't people go to college to get this kind of job? Like, want to be skipping a few years ahead? Mm-hmm. And then I also thought, maybe apprenticeship is better for me, because I wasn't really clicking with college. I got to college and I was like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. And they were like, no, we'll tell you what to do. And I was like, no, I'm going to do my own. I want to produce a play and I'm going to do this. And they were like, no, dude, like, you go to our classes. And I was like, oh. So I decided I would drop out and work for this guy. And a bird pooped at me earlier today. I get to the first day of work. I knock on his door. He doesn't say anything. The door's open, but I knocked anyway. He doesn't say anything. He just beckons me in wordlessly. And so I walked over to his desk, and he still doesn't say anything. I'm standing at his desk. He reaches behind him like some kind of Jedi master and just pulls out the exact book that he wanted and puts it down. Opens it up. It's a Pantone color guide with all the chips. And he starts flipping through it, still not talking to me at all, and I'm just waiting. and he flips through like reds, gets into the browns, the lighter browns, like the mocha, sort of chocolatey mocha ones, tears it out, puts that one down on his desk, puts a finger on it, and slides it towards me, and says to me, "That's how I take my coffee."
Oh, damn.
And I was like, oh, it was just all this stuff in my head in 1 second. Was like, oh my God, I dropped out of college and I have to go to the Dunkin' Donuts and see if I can get the lady to put the right amount of cream to match the color of the thing. And I can't, I dropped out of college. Oh my God, I'm going to be getting this guy's coffee. And he could see me and he was like, oh my God, what kind of jerk do you think I am? It's a joke. Like, come on. And I was like, oh. Thank God. And
that's amazing.
So he was.
That's kind of a badass art director thing to do, though.
Actually,
match his Pantone to my coffee.
But you know, it would have been a good thing if I could have. It would have been a good test because it's really hard to match color. Anyway, so he turns out to be this unbelievable influence on me. I worked for him for about 2.5 years. He didn't just teach me about graphic design. I mean, he taught me so many important things. Like, he taught me you take ego out of your work. Getting jackets turned down is part of the job. Mm-hmm. It's not that you didn't do a great design. It's that the salespeople don't think they can move that one, or the editorial people don't think that is, in line with the book. And I don't always read the book. So it taught me to take the ego out, and it also taught me that creativity is this renewable resource. There's no one design for a book cover. There's infinite. Like, oh, you don't like that one? I'll just do another one. Mm-hmm. You just always go on. And also, I grew up without a dad, so he was kind of a father figure. I would ask him stuff like, how did you know when it was the right time to propose to your wife? Or, how much did you ask for when you got your first job? And, he was like, why are you asking me these things? And I said, because you're old and you know things.
Yeah. Because
I was 19. So anyways, getting to your question about how art became technology. During this time I was working for Steve, he had taken the job as an art director because he had started a family and he had 2 girls and he needed stability and health insurance and all this stuff. But he had filled my head with his younger years when he had his own design studio and he was making all this money and all this stuff. And I was like, ooh, that sounds good. I want to do that. And then what happened was they decided to move the whole art department to New York City. And so there was a period of change. So I thought, I won't go. I'll start my own design studio. And I quickly found out that book cover work was few and far between. Mm-hmm. And I made business cards. I made my own business cards that just said Biz Stone Professional. And that way, whatever somebody said, do you do this? I said, yes. So I was like, here's my card, Biz Stone Professional. And they were like, oh, I gave it to I think it was a professor at a college. And they said, do you do web design? And I said, yes, I do. And they were like, great, because we have a big budget for a whole new website for our department. And I was like, fantastic. I'll do it. And
just you independently?
Yeah.
Or had you brought on?
No, it was just me.
Okay.
It was just me. It was a total sham operation. I was working in my mom's basement, and so I quickly taught myself enough HTML to build a really crappy website for them, but they thought it was great. And I built my own website. What I did for my own website for Biz Stone, I forget what I called it, like Stone Design or something like that. But I found this picture in a Pottery Barn catalog of this really beautiful, awesome, gorgeous office, and I scanned it in. I just put it on the front page, and I said Biz Stone Design.
Amazing.
And I actually got jobs because this education institute or something called me in to do a series of books, like a big job, a whole bunch of books for thousands of dollars. It was a big good gig, and they were like, "We love your office." Yeah. And I was like,
oh, it's being
I'm thinking of my mom's basement because I was meeting them at their place, and I was like, "You love my office?" Oh, right, the picture on my website. So I didn't want to lie, so I said, "Yeah, that's a dream office."
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. So, and I kind of think I got the job because they thought I was that successful anyway.
This is actually a really common theme that I see, though. A lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early days, like they're hustlers. They're just like doing anything and everything they can
whatever.
to get that first chunk of work.
Yes, I'm a professional at that. And I charge $150 an hour. Yes, I do? Okay, yes, I do. But so anyways, what happened was, then I started designing websites. Then my friends who had gone to college, then gone into consulting, hated consulting, and said, let's start a web company. This was 1999, so their idea was, we'll start a web company. That was the startup, web company. So they were like, you're doing web stuff. Let's do a web company. So we started a service called Xanga.com, Xanga.com. Never name a thing and then with a letter that you have to then explain how to spell it. It's not a good way to go. So that was one of the early social blogging network type things. And
still based out of the same...
We based it in New York City.
Okay.
And that was my first startup. And so that's how I got from being an artist, then designer, and then working with these two guys on a startup. And that got me kind of hooked on like, oh, this is really building companies and building experiences for people to be able to design their own websites and express themselves is a fun thing. It's kind of like meta. For an artist, it's like, oh, my art is designing a way for someone else to express themselves. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. And then,
did you take more of a product role at this point? Or were you CEO or what was
I designed everything, but as a result of being the designer of everything, I also ended up being a product guy because I would just design features. Like Blogger was coming. We were using Pyra, which was Evan Williams' company. Blogger actually started out as software called Pyra, which was for groups that were not in the same place to be able to coordinate. Kind of like Quip and HipChat and all these other. There's a bunch of these things.
Sure.
You know about it. So. And we were using that because we hadn't yet consolidated to all of us to New York City. And so we were some of the first to see Blogger come out. And so Xanga was, the original idea was enter in the names of your CDs and your books that you own and review them, kind of like e-opinions, except I didn't have anything. So I was like cramming into the form like funny stories about how like my taxi cab ride and stuff, and people, that was funny. I was like, I know, but I put it in where we're supposed to review a CD. And so when Blogger came out, I was like, oh, we got to do that. We got to just let people write whatever they want. Mm-hmm. And I thought Xanga was actually better than Blogger because Blogger was FTPing and you didn't know how to do all this stuff. And I was like, no, we'll just host everything and people can comment. And I made up so basically I just designed a thing like for people to blog, comment on each other's blogs. If they were too lazy to comment, I made up this thing called e-props, which was 0, 1, or 2 little like Super Mario Brother coins that you could give to somebody on their post. Mm-hmm. And 0 was kind of like, that sucked. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, so whatever. Yeah, it was design / product.
When you think about building products, especially back in those days, is this something where you were collaborating with a bunch of people? Is it something where it was, you're in the shower and you're like, oh, this is just something I want to try and I don't know if it's going to work? Or
it was mostly sitting hunched over the laptop on Photoshop, just really psyched about just coming up with lots of different things. Like, oh, there's space here for a button. Like, what button should I put here? How about comment? Like, oh yeah, comments could be a cool thing. I just was like doing it, and then I would go back to work the next day, and one of the guys was always getting peeved at me. He's like, you can't just do this. We haven't spec'd it all out or anything. Like, you got the engineers building these things, all excited and building these things. And I was like, I know, because it's cool. And he was like, that's not how we do it. Like, because he came from consulting, and mm-hmm. we were kind of at odds. But the other guy who I started with was Mark Ginsberg, my friend, who had the original Mac. So we were friends. But what happened with that company was this other guy started hiring a bunch of his consultant buddies. I don't know why. And it really changed the culture. My original vision was, let's have a small startup in Boston next to MIT, and let's hire engineers out of MIT and build a cool thing. And this other guy was like, no, let's be in New York City because that's where I live and that's where it's happening. And I was like, all right, well, if we're going to be in New York City, let's at least be in Union Square, like near where they have the farmers market and stuff. And he's like, no, we're going to get the cheapest place we can next to the Port Authority. And I was like, okay. And so I lost the vote on that. And then I had to move to New York with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And she grew up in New York. She hated New York, so she was unhappy. And then he started hiring all these consultant dudes, and so the culture was just going way not the way I wanted it to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit. Looking back, I realized how green I was. I should have worked harder to make a difference and change the culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I just quit instead, and then Zanga sort of faded into obscurity. I'm not saying it's because I quit, but it didn't work out, and it didn't work out for me. And then I found myself back in my mom's basement, and then I was like, what have I done? Like, I don't want to be on this side of the screen. I was super bummed out about that. And all I had was my blog. It was my blog and my credit card debt at that point.
How did you end up eventually connecting up with Evan Williams? Because you were aware of Blogger at the time. Had you guys met?
We never met.
Were you enemies? Because you were...
We weren't enemies.
Creating a competing product at that time, right?
Yeah, we weren't enemies. Well, I mean, I get people. We weren't enemies. But you could say we were rivals, but I never felt like an enemy. In fact, I really admired him. I thought this guy's got it. And like this is totally a thing. The democratization of information, letting people who don't know how to code create websites and express. This is it. I was like so into it. I was writing articles about it. I was constantly writing about it on my own blog. I got even invited to write a book, and I was like, ooh, I'm a book author now. That's fancy. And I wrote 2 books about blogging. So what happened was I was following Evan's blog for a long time, and I just was like basically intellectually had an intellectual crush on the guy. And I was like, this guy is totally... exactly what I want to do. And when Blogger got acquired by Google, I sent him a note, and I said, I feel like I'm the missing 7th member of your team. I've always felt like I should have worked for you. And so if you end up hiring more people at Blogger inside Google, I don't know, maybe email me. And I didn't think anything would come of it. And then he wrote back, like, you want to work here? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's cool. And so there's a whole story to this, which is that Larry and Sergey were like, no way we're hiring this guy. He didn't even graduate college, let alone... Because they were hiring CS, PhD guys. Like, they were like, this is...
It's still a really difficult thing to pull in people that don't have degrees.
How are you going to possibly get the... And so Evan, little did I know, he was like pulling not just strings, ropes, chains, to try to get me and, to come work there, because he felt like, we have we have a bunch of engineers, but we really need someone who understands the social part of social media. We could use, because it turns out he had been reading my stuff all along, and I didn't know that. And so he thought I was like funny and engaging and could be like the missing part of, the social part of social media. And so he did all this work behind the scenes. And I just thought he was like, come out here and work. And I was like, great, got a job. And they said, well, you just got to talk to Wayne Rosing, who was then the head of all engineering because Larry and Sergey were like, no. And finally they relented and they said, well, if Wayne likes him, then he can come out here and meet people. And I talked to Wayne, and Wayne liked me because I explained to him I didn't go to college because I apprenticed, and I wrote these 2 books, and I'm really into it and everything. And Wayne was like, seems good. He quit like a month later, so maybe he just didn't care. But anyway, it was funny because at the time I had a really unnatural fear of flying, and Evan said, okay, like, it looks like you got the job. You just have to fly out here and meet some people as a formality, which he was presenting it was actually come out here for 12 interviews to see, but he was like, oh, just go meet some, and I was like, I have to fly out there. And then I said, never mind. I don't want the job. And he was like, what the hell? And then they were like, all right, Stone, we'll double the equity. We'll double the, and I was like, oh, they think I'm playing hardball? Like, I never do that. And so then I talked to my friends and they're like, you're an idiot. You gotta do this. So I went out there, and what I thought was like formality was, in fact, the famously harsh.
Yeah. How many
Google,
people balls?
12 people. And Ev took me out the night before till like late night drinking, getting totally smashed. So I was so hungover, and I had to meet 12 people and go on all these interviews.
I'm surprised he passed, to be honest.
I have no idea how that.
Tough.
Like the first lady in the first interview was like, so do you have any questions for me? And I was like, yeah, do you have any aspirin? I'm super hungover. Like, and she was like, okay. And I asked one guy, I was like, do you even know why you're interviewing me? There's so many interviews. And he was like, no, I started here yesterday. And I was like, what? Anyway, so the point is, I didn't meet Evan until he picked me up at the airport to go work at Google.
Crazy.
It was weird. Wow. We'd never met. He picked me up in his yellow Subaru, and he was like, hi, I'm Evan. And I was like, I'm Biz. And we just liked each other right away. And worked with him at Google and loved it until he decided he left. I guess his deal with Google was only 2 years or something. So he decided he was going to leave Google.
What was it like for you at Google, having never really been in that type of environment? Like, I know, like, this is like Google Ventures, like, give me the bad, too.
No, it was fine. Well, first of all, I had this, my blog was called Biz Stone Genius after this episode of, it was a joke. Some people thought it was real, and I was like some kind of a jerk, but it was a total joke because I was obviously not a genius. And it was based on this episode of Bugs Bunny where Wile E. Coyote makes an appearance, and it's the one time Wile E. Coyote ever speaks. And he builds a door in front of Bugs' hole, and he knocks on the door, and Bugs opens it, and he says, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wile E. Coyote, genius. And he gives him the card, and it says Wile E. Coyote, genius. So I named my blog Biz Stone Genius, and I pretended that I had Genius Labs, like this. It was like this Tony Stark like situation where I had unlimited funding, and I would joke around that I was working on like Japanese hybrid air transit, and the Peruvian government needs me to help them redesign their school system and this and that. And a funny side story is when I actually went to work at Google, I wrote a joke blog post that said Google acquires Genius Labs, which was clearly a joke, but somebody put it in Wikipedia, and then New York Times wrote an article because it was in Wikipedia, and then Wikipedia was like, oh, it's in the New York Times. We have a citation. It's real. So,
please tell me that it's still in your Wikipedia today.
It's in there, and it's in, ever since that, every magazine that's ever printed a list of Google's acquisitions, Genius Labs is in there.
That is awesome.
Anyway, so for me, going to work at Google was like the real Genius Labs. I was like, oh my God. Like I would walk around and open a door, and there would be a guy just barefoot in a room full of DVRs with all these wires and TVs. And I was like, what are you doing in here? And he was like, I'm recording everything being broadcast in the world. And I was like, carry on. and it was like they had first started scanning books, and I walked into some room, there's like all these people like operating these foot pedal light things, and I was like, what are you guys doing in here? And they were like, we're scanning every book ever published. And I was like, carry on. I shouldn't have probably been walking around just looking at stuff.
You did the exact same thing I did. I like tried to get in as much trouble as possible and just like peek into every
Well, I wasn't
door.
trying to get in trouble, but so in that way it was very much like a real life Genius Labs. But on the other hand, I'm not really good with structure. And at one point they gave me a manager, and the guy came from Microsoft, and like the first thing he said to us, he decided he was going to be the manager of the Blogger team, after Ev left, and he came in and he said, "Do you guys want to take a guess at what I've been doing for the last 10 years?" And we were like, I was like, "I'm working somewhere," and he's like, "I've been on my couch because I don't need to work." And we were like, "Okay, so you're rich then, I guess?" And he was like, and anyway, he took me into his office and he was like, "What are your OKRs, your objectives and key results?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "All right, well let's work them out." And I basically let him like figure them out for me. And then I met him 3 months later and he was like, "Okay, how'd we do?" And I was like, I didn't really do any of that stuff." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "That was kind of your thing. I didn't really want to do any of that stuff." And he got so angry. He turned bright red and like he was so mad at me. And he was telling people that I should get fired. And a girl who worked with me, she went in to see him. And after she came out, she's like, "What did you say to this guy?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "Your name was like crossed out angrily like 100 times on his whiteboard." And I was like, "Oh." So that part of it didn't work for me. And
I had a very similar situation.
Eventually what happened was a high up director guy said, "You know what, how about you just don't have any boss and we'll just give you the maximum bonuses and you just do whatever you want." And I was like, "That sounds great." And I had it all worked out and then I quit. I had like the perfect setup and then I quit because Ev quit. So in one regard it was great, and in the other regard I now live by a certain philosophy when it comes to building these large-scale systems that allow people to express themselves and communicate. And that's a simple ordered list, and it goes number 1, people, number 2, technology. And I often got the impression that at some of these big Silicon Valley companies, it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So you know, it was great, but and it allowed me to get out of debt, which was awesome. But then I went right back into debt because I quit and I bought a house in Berkeley, which I shouldn't have bought, and so I was immediately back in debt, living off my credit cards again. And I left because Ev left, and it was kind of like the college situation. I had to decide when Ev left. I had to decide, well, what did I move out here for? Did I move out here to work for Google? Or did I move out here to work with Evan Williams?
Mm-hmm.
And I hashed it out with my wife, and I was like, I came out here to work with Evan Williams. So
did you guys have any idea what you were going to go build at that point? Or was it
Audio.
Just like,
we had this idea.
We
had this idea in the car that we could democratize audio, maybe like we did, like Blogger did with information on the web. Because I was thinking, like, can't you record your voice in Flash, and couldn't we convert that to an MP3? And these new iPod thingies are getting popular. Maybe we can write some software that syncs whatever you record to the thing, and we could just like, everyone could have their own radio station kind of. And he was like, "Ooh, that could be a thing." And
that was a beautiful design site. Was that your design, or was that?
Yeah, I was the designer.
It's beautiful.
I was the
star logo, right?
I think someone else designed the logo, and I was I forget what my title was there, but I did a lot of design work on that. Mm-hmm. I did like the player and stuff like that. The logo was really just a font and a star and the O, which was cool. I think Noah Glass did that, or he either did it or I hired someone to do it. But it was a good name too for an audio type of company. Anyway, so I left because Ev left. And it didn't really matter what it was. It was just the fact that I wanted to follow Ev. So Livy and I had to make that hard decision, like, because we were leaving behind millions of dollars, and I had lived my whole life poor, then my whole life in debt, and now it was like, oh my God, we could be rich, or I could go work for Evan.
They call that vest in peace, where you're just investing.
Oh yeah, or resting investing. Yeah.
I've heard that one.
Anyway, so I basically ended up doing what I always do, which is following people. I decided that was the right thing to do. Follow Ev. Audio didn't work out, but the next thing was Twitter, and that did work out. So
I'm curious why.
I sort of developed this theory that you can't really go wrong following people rather than institutions.
What made you break out on your own this time? Because I mean, Ev obviously went out to do Medium now.
Well, I left Twitter in 2011, and Evan and I teamed up again to tinker. And it was funny because one of the first things I said we should build, I said, you know what we should build? TextTube. And he was like, what's that? And I was like, it's a bad name, but it's to illustrate a point. It's YouTube, but for writing. Like, in other words, a network for good writing, so that if, just like YouTube says, like, oh, you like it when somebody gets kicked in the balls? Like, we have lots of those. And so if there was a place where people wrote content when it was like, oh, you like reading about what's going on in Russia? We got more of that. And we were like, yeah, we should totally do that. And then we didn't do it. We did a bunch of other stuff. And then like a year went by and we started working on...
What other stuff did you do that never got launched?
Mostly productivity type software, because Ev's a productivity geek. And he was like, I could care less about this stuff.
Is there stuff that people have never heard of here before that you can mention that like you prototyped out just to see?
Yeah, we built something we never had a real name for it. We called it, what did we call it? It was a riff off My Little Pony. It was called My Little, damn. Jason Goldman would remember the name. But it was an iPad app. Oh, it was called My Little Standy. And it was an iPad app where you just kept your iPad on your desk, and it had it did two things. It was like who you were in the company, whether or not you were available for lunch, how many Fitbit steps you'd taken, like a bunch of little panels about you and you personally. Mm-hmm. And then all that was also aggregated to a bigger one, like the whole company has walked this many miles today. And that was just a thing we made. And then what else did we make? We were also doing investing. We also decided we would help other people. So like, and we decided we wouldn't just invest, we would invest and heavily advise. So we...
You did Lyft, I remember.
Yeah, so Lyft,
awesome.
L-I-F-T, not the car ride one, but the one that is like a personal life coach app.
I still use that, it's great.
So we did that with Tony Stubblebine, who worked with us at Odeo, and we invested in Branch, which was kind of supposed to be like sort of a higher level of discussion on the
Brilliant
internet.
Entrepreneur. That's some of the products.
That guy,
great.
Josh Miller, is super smart young guy.
He got acquired too.
They went
recently.
to Facebook, yeah. And then some other ones. And so we were taking sort of pitch meetings, tinkering, and then it just came back around like, you know what, let's like stop kidding ourselves. Like, we're gonna build Medium, what became Medium. It's destined to happen. So we built it, and as we were building it, two things started to happen. One, I realized that Evan and I were just completely agreeing on everything. Like, I was like, "You're right," and he was like, "You're right," and I was like, "You're right too," and he's like, "You're right too," and I was like, we might as well be one person. And then at the same time, I sort of got the impression that he wanted to kind of have a go at like kind of running the whole thing start to finish. Because if you look at his life, you know, he's like, he started Blogger and he sold it before it became a business. And then you look at Twitter, and we started together, but he left before it became a business. And I sort of got the impression that he wanted to say, like, I'm going to take something, be the CEO of it, and take it all the way through.
Yeah.
And that combined with the fact that I didn't really have a very specific role. Like, I wasn't the designer on Medium. I was the chief creative officer of Obvious. So it meant like everything. Like, I was in charge of creativity for everything, which was very vague. And so I realized I didn't have a very specific role at Medium, and I got this hunch that Ev kind of wanted to run it. And then the third thing was, I thought, well, wouldn't I if I did my own thing, wouldn't I create more surface area for good stuff to happen rather than just sitting here agreeing with Ev every day, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't mean to have an idea. In fact, I started working like 3 days a week at Medium, and I directed a film with this project with Ron Howard. I decided to write a book, which I wrote, and I was doing like all these different weird creative things. I was lecturing more at schools, and I told Livy, I was like, maybe I'll just do this quirky stuff. Like maybe Brian Grazer saw an early cut of my short film and said, "Do you want to direct movies?" And I was like, maybe this could be cool. And I told my wife, I was like, maybe I'll just like stay at home a lot of the times. And we have a 2.5-year-old son now. Maybe I'll just like direct a movie and write a book and occasionally lecture and stuff. And then I accidentally came up with this idea for Jelly while I was on a walk with my friend Ben Finkel. And then I felt nauseous because I was like, oh God, I think this is a good idea. And then I ran it by everybody, like Jack, and I ran it by Greg Pass and all these, like Kevin Thaw. And I ran it by them hoping they'd say like, nah, what is that? That's stupid. And they were all like, whoa, that's a great idea. You should totally do that. Also, it's perfect for you because it's based at a fundamental level. It's people helping each other, and that's what you love to do, help people. And I was like, oh no. And so, and I just felt sick because also Ben Finkel was only 2 years into Twitter, and he was really good. And also, I didn't want to ruin his life because we had this idea together, and I was like, if we do it, we'll be co-founders. But you shouldn't leave Twitter. Like, Twitter's gonna eventually go public, and you'll get a lot of money. And you have 2 years to go. But we just couldn't get this idea of our head, and he did the same thing I did with Google, is he decided to leave and start Jelly with me. So we just felt like it was one of those things where we just felt like we had to pursue it, because even if it totally fails, we couldn't go wrong building a system where people help other people. Like, even if that fails, you know, I'm not going to be disappointed that I didn't try on that.
What have you learned in your kind of transition from just creative director, product person into a CEO role?
Well, I've had the advantage of being able to sort of be on the front lines of watching and learning and figuring out what to do and what not to do from a CEO perspective. And
You mean being on the executive team of like Twitter and things like that?
Yeah, especially Twitter, and especially my years at Twitter. And you know, I went to all the board meetings and all that stuff, so I really got to soak it all in and realize that just like a lot like with design, at least half the job of being a good CEO is communication. Just over communication, like, you know, communicating as much as possible, because people tend to fear what they don't understand or what they don't know. Like in the ancient days, you know, people heard thunder and they thought, oh my God, the gods are angry, they're going to smite us, right? And if you transpose that kind of, well, I don't know what's going on with this company into the business world, the fear turns into, well, I guess this guy's doing a bad job.
Right. They let certain scenarios play out in their own brain.
Right. And then boards of directors really only have one. They're not going to come in and redesign your product. They have one thing they can do: fire the CEO.
Right.
And so I figured out, like, well, you just got to communicate constantly, even if you're doing badly. Communicate that constantly. So what I do is every Sunday I spend 3 hours crafting an email that goes out to everybody who has a stake in the company, everyone, all employees, all investors, and all advisors. And I say everything that happened that week: product, somebody had a baby, whatever, anything. Like, just I sort of all encompassing, but it's kept short so that it's not overwhelming. I use this app called IA Writer, which is kind of like Medium in that it actually shows you how long it should approximately take to read the piece I'm writing. I always try to keep it under 3 minutes. Anyway, so the transition has been exciting and fun. I really have enjoyed it. There's a lot of similarities between design and CEO. And I just mostly communication is what I've learned is the key aspect. I think humor also is. I've always thought humor is sort of a secret delivery mechanism for truth, and it's a key quality for leadership. Dick Costolo has this in spades. You know, he used to be in improv, Second City Improv. He's hilarious. So he does really well. He uses it really well. My challenge has been my weakness has always been I'm too jokey. And so when it's time for me to be taken seriously, people are like, ha. I'm like, no, I'm being serious now. They're like, you're so funny. And and I'm like, oh shoot, I was too jokey. So I'm trying to balance it out and sort of be more CEO-ish these days, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be jokey. I'm just going to not always be jokey. But I love it. I think it's great. And I love having this small, quick team. And I love this new era we're living in where it's possible to have a team of tens and customers in the hundreds of millions because of Amazon Web Services, Google, what's the Google version of Amazon Web Services called?
The cloud computing stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the brand name.
What's the brand name?
Google.
For it?
Google Cloud Computing. This kind of stuff. I read an interview with the CTO of Snapchat, and he said he never saw a server.
Yeah, he's
the CTO. He's never seen a server.
That's funny.
Because everything's on Google's cloud. And so anyways, it's just really exciting to think that we could potentially, if we're successful, have hundreds of millions of customers with tens of employees, and we'll all know each other, and we could just create an awesome workplace and have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, because we're going a little bit long, I wanted to cover your book.
Okay.
What's in your book? Why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote this book because I've been giving a lecture for more than a decade at Oxford University. It's called a master class. And I honed it and I honed it and I honed it. And I started getting invited to do it in lots of other places. There's a philanthropic organization called College Track, and that helps high school students get into college. And I started speaking to high school students. Then I got invited to talk to European CEOs, and then I got invited to talk to middle management bankers. And what was weird was that everyone from high school students to CEOs were coming up to me afterwards and saying, wow, this lecture really resonated with me, especially this part or that part. And I thought, this is a really broad range of people that are finding value in my little stories and the lessons learned from the stories. Because really, that's all it is. It's just a story, and then here's what I took away from that.
100 little stories?
No, it's each chapter is a story, and then it ends with a lesson. And some of the stories are funny, and so someone said, you should write a book. And I was like, wow, what am I going to write a book about? Oh, I'll turn my lecture into a book, and then I won't have to do the lecture anymore. But that was wrong, because it turns out when you write a book, everyone wants
on the road.
Yeah. So that backfired. But that's why I wrote the book, because someone just suggested it, and I thought, well, I have the material. I've had it for a long time sitting around, and I thought, instead of one at a time, groups of people, I could just give this. If it's valuable, then why not just, go wide with it? So the book is being published in 10 different countries and languages, and it's on Kindle, and it's on iBooks, and it's on whatever. It's everywhere. So the lecture is now wide open,
Thanks for bringing some books in. I'm going to definitely check it out and give it a read after this.
Yeah.
One last final question. We're sitting with obviously a bunch of entrepreneurs in the room here watching this. If you had to distill down all of your knowledge over the years, and you had one takeaway for these people here, either one thing that you did really well that you continue to do, in your companies going forward, or one thing that you really screwed up that you would absolutely avoid? Like, is there any words of wisdom that you could share?
Yeah, if I had to say one thing, the most important thing, and I did it wrong enough to realize that now I know what it is that you have to have an emotional investment in what you're working on. Success is not guaranteed, but failure pretty much is guaranteed if you're not emotionally invested in what you're working on. We didn't care about podcasting. That's why audio didn't work. It's not because Apple got into podcasting. We could have pivoted and done something else. We didn't podcast and we didn't listen to podcasts. But with Twitter, early on, I was laughing. Like one day I was having a bad day and I was doing something I didn't want to be doing, and Evan had a tweet that said sipping Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley, and it made me laugh out loud. And when I had kind of an out-of-body experience, because I was like, I'm laughing out loud at something I'm working on. And then once I realized that, I was like, I love what I'm working on. I'm experiencing joy. And that carried me through unbelievable amounts of negativity for the first 3 years of Twitter. Everyone's saying how stupid it. If I wasn't emotionally invested in loving it, I would have believed everyone. So that's the one thing that I always say is, you might have an idea that you think other people will work, and other people will like this. It's not for me, but
Right.
I think that's the wrong way to go. I think
Scratching
you have to
your own personal
love
itch.
what you want to do. Yeah. That is what my one piece of advice is. Have emotional investment in your work and you will be far more likely to succeed.
Awesome. Well, big round of applause for Biz.
Thank you.
For coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.